2002 was one hell of a year, one that feels very different to the one that we currently live in. For instance, notable historic events from 2002 include a severe acute respiratory syndrome epidemic that began in the Guangdong province of China. Wait, what? In 2002, I was 10 years old, and I wouldn't get a next-generation console until a year later in 2003, when my parents bought me a Nintendo GameCube for my birthday. But despite that, 2002 still, in my mind, feels like the first year I properly got into video games. It was the year I started to buy Nintendo magazines. It was the year I started to buy PC Gamer. It was the year I started to make enough money through chores around the house that I was able to start buying my own video games outside of just receiving them for birthdays and Christmas. For a while, I've wanted to talk about my favourite games on the channel. I've wanted to enthuse about games from my past that I really, really love, and I didn't quite know how to do it, so I thought, well, why don't I just take away time from my Game of the Year 2020 video and instead spend a week making a video about my favourite games from 19 years ago. Basically, I made a decision last August to just do whatever I wanted on this channel, so I'm sorry you're going to get a lot of stuff like this. And I guess we'll just start with my favourite games from 2002. Some of these games were technically released in PAL regions a year later in 2003, because that was just a thing that happened in the early 2000s, right? Like a game would come out in November 2002 in America, and we wouldn't get it until March 2003. They're real dates for Metroid Prime. We had to wait that long to get Metroid Prime. What was that about? If a game was released in the West, whether that be North America or Europe, in a year, I guess I've counted that as the year it came out. Also, some GameCube versions didn't come out until like 6 months later, so some games I mention here I didn't play on the platform they came out in 2002, but I'm talking about games that came out 19 years ago, so does it matter? It probably doesn't matter, right? Anyway, enough dilly-dallying. These are my favourite games from 2002. It's a list of games that turn 20 next year. That sucks, doesn't it? Let's start. So at number 7, we have Tom Clancy's... Oh, I'm doing 7 of these, by the way. At number 7, we have Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell. I already loved the idea of stealth games because I used to play Metal Gear Solid at a friend's house all the time, and I never got a chance to play through its sequel until about a year and a half, 2 years later, when my friend finally bought a PlayStation 2. So when I first saw this game called Splinter Cell in the pages of Cube magazine, I was blown away. It's funny looking back at it now because the original Splinter Cell looks like a murky, kind of terrible mess, but at the time, I don't think I'd ever seen something that looked this realistic. The lighting in this game, for the time, really was quite spectacular. And it had to be, right? Because light was the basis for Splinter Cell's stealth systems. It wasn't the first game to do this. I know that Thief did it way before Sam Fisher came along, but it still felt very special to a wide-eyed kid whose idea of stealth games involved cyborg ninjas and scientists pissing themselves in cupboards. I think it was the realism that really appealed to me. I remember really vividly looking at, I think it was screenshots, maybe it was video, because I know that Cube did give away a DVD at some point, but I remember seeing something of a office environment in Splinter Cell. I think that was in the first game, but I remember looking at this office environment and being like, this looks incredible. Like, this is a real life location that I could visit in the real world, but I'm interacting with it in such a fantastical way. And just all of what the game had as main features, like using fiber optic wire to peek through keyholes, or turning off the lights, or shooting lights, and then doing splits in corridors to avoid detection from people who walked below you, and obviously just using night vision. The whole free thing ruled. Like, just what an aesthetic for the game to have. I do reckon going back to this would feel very primitive now, especially in a post-Metal Gear Solid 5 world, but at the time this methodical, realistic stealth game felt like something really different. I sucked at it and obviously never finished it, but it definitely instilled in me a love for mechanics-driven stealth games that provide players with a number of tools and environmental systems that can be utilised in tandem in order to progress. The game just had such a distinct personality to it as well. A specific tone that just feels quite uniquely Splinter Cell. I really love Splinter Cell. I loved the entire series. In fact, I even loved Conviction and Blacklist, even though they kind of traded stealth for action. I still really liked those games. I'd love to see them come back in some form. In fact, I just love to see Splinter Cell in general come back, because I think it's a series that really deserves another chance, especially in a post-Metal Gear Solid 5 Hitman world. I think they could really do something very fun and cool with it. It would have to be open world, maybe, but then it's Ubisoft, so they'd probably ruin it. In at number 6, we have Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. Tony Hawk wasn't just a game series when I was a kid, it was almost like a cultural touchstone. It was a series as synonymous with video games as Zelda or Pokemon, Grand Theft Auto even. If you owned a game console, if you knew about gaming, you knew about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. The first game came out when I was 7, the second when I was 8. I guess I was a bit too young for those first 2 games, and probably the third one as well. I owned the first game on PlayStation, but it never clicked for me. It was too, I don't know, maybe mechanically complex for a kid to get into, maybe a dumb kid like I very obviously was. So I never really got into the series to an obsessive degree until I played THPS 4 on the GameCube. The series had really found its groove by the time the 4th game came out, although it did feature a couple of new additions that improved gameplay, such as spine transfers. Its career mode was also substantially different from the previous 3 games. Instead of being tasked with completing a list of objectives within a certain amount of time, you were instead able to freely roam a location and get missions from different NPCs, which became the norm for the series moving forward. I poured hundreds of hours into this game, both alone and with pals. THPS 4 is often missed, I think, when talking about the original run of games, but I think that this was probably the last great Tony Hawk's release. It was just mechanically flawless, and as a package of modes, levels, and characters, it was pretty much everything a Tony Hawk's game should be. I mean, the series went off the rails after this one. For good and for bad, we'll get to it when I do my best games of 2004. But this was the last big hurrah for a team that had probably achieved everything they could feasibly achieve within this very specific format, and the series never returned to this height until 2020's remakes, which nailed the tone this game arguably perfected. These games are just like the most pure a gameplay experience as you can get. Good game. I love that game. In at number 5, we have Metroid Prime. The fact that this is at number 5 is probably indicative of just how many great games came out in 2002. Not a comment on the quality of Metroid Prime, put it that way, because I absolutely adore Metroid Prime. What can I say about it that hasn't already been said by a million smarter people? My favourite thing about Nintendo's weird little box console is how willing the company were to innovate, more so than they usually are. The company just took so many risks this generation. The console launched with a game about Mario's brother fighting ghosts. This was the follow-up to Super Mario 64. Who does this? But making Metroid into a full 3D first-person shooter was honestly, in my eyes, probably their riskiest punt. Thankfully, it absolutely paid off, because this game is pure magic. It takes the classic Metroidvania format that the series created and brings it into the 3D space so flawlessly. I think it's hard not to think of Metroid Prime as much a core entry to the Metroid franchise as the 2D side-scrollers that birthed it. This game combines stunning environments with tough enemies, an unreplicatable sense of adventure and progress, wonderful music, fantastic upgrades and weapons. Playing through this game for the first time was just mind-blowing. It emulated the sensation of being alone in this truly alien environment flawlessly. Everything just felt dangerous and weird. A huge part of this game is exploring these ancient ruins created by long-gone civilizations, and it just gives the planet this sense that it was a real place that actually existed. It's just sort of on the precipice of our understanding. The atmosphere is just, it's that brilliant that it makes you think weird thoughts like that. The backtracking is a bit piss. I think that's probably the part of the game that's aged the worst, but other than that, the original Prime still feels as flawless in your hands as it did in 2002 or 2003, depends where you live. A Switch re-release of this just feels inevitable, especially considering Nintendo are quite rightly returning the series into the hands of Retro Studios for the 4th entry, but it does make me wonder what that re-release will look like. Like, will it be as low quality as Mario 35th Anniversary 3D All-Stars? What's that game called? With a little bit of spit and polish, with just a touch of care and attention. The first 3 games in this series would just feel brand new on the Switch, but I think we'll just get a re-release of the Wii trilogy, which isn't bad because I think these games work really well with a Wiimote. It would be nice if they were properly HD, wouldn't it? I don't know, Nintendo, man, but I can't predict what they'll do. At number 4, we have Resident Evil Remake on the GameCube. So I played the original trilogy of Resident Evil games when I was way too young. The same friend who had Metal Gear Solid used to have the original trilogy of Resident Evil games, and I would go around every other weekend and we would normally finish one Resident Evil game over the course of an evening. Now you'd think that playing these games at the age of 6 or 7, a fundamentally ridiculous age to be playing these games, by the way, but you'd think that by playing them that young I would have become desensitized to the zombies in the games, just the concept of the undead in general. Like, you'd think seeing a flesh-eating creature of the night wouldn't bother me, right? You'd think that, but you'd be wrong. In Newcastle, there used to be a game station that was over the road from a McDonald's. And one night around Halloween, my dad took me and my sister to a McDonald's. Now, my dad hates McDonald's. He absolutely despises them. So something must have been wrong that night. I think his car had broken down when we were in Newcastle city centre. He had 2 young kids with him who needed food, so he took them to a McDonald's in Newcastle. So already there's like a weird vibe that a 10-year-old is probably like really picking up, right? My dad was probably stressed. My sister was very young at the time. She was probably stressed. It was cold and dark and raining, and I remember eating my McDonald's and looking out the window over the road, and in the window of Game Station they had a cardboard cutout of this render of a zombie from Resident Evil Remake. It scared the fucking shit out of me. Like, it really got in my head. I really fucking hated this render, and it was everywhere. It was in all the reviews and magazines for Resident Evil Remake, and even though I loved Resident Evil, I was like, nah, I ain't fucking playing that shit. Yeah, I didn't play this until I was like 15, and I bought it for £2 or something. When I actually finally played it, I fell in love. I think I played it after I played Resident Evil 4, so I was like well into the Resident Evil series again at this point, and God, this game, man, this fucking game. This is still, in my mind, one of the best examples, maybe the best example, of how to remake a game in a way that both modernizes it for new audiences while remaining faithful to the original release. This remake expanded on the original game in every possible way. It brought the Spencer Mansion to life, rendering each room and hallway to an unbelievable degree of fidelity for 2002. It felt like a real place, a grotty, dirty, forgotten space that felt claustrophobic and nightmarish. It obviously made massive improvements to the voice acting and general performances from the original game, and although it's still as schlocky as every other Resident Evil game, I really love the cast in Remake. I think Jill and Barry are really well realised in this game. Like, Jill especially feels like probably my favourite version of Jill. I loved her in the 3 remake, but there's just something about this specific version of her that feels really cool, really grounded. I like it when she throws up in the bath. But what made this remake so special is what they changed. There's this big hoo-ha in the modern era about why remakes should be a one-to-one retread of the original release, but I just don't agree with that. Remake proved that a great remake makes the game as exciting for fans of the original as it is for newcomers. So Remake added a load of additional things. It added new areas, new enemies, new ideas, but best of all, it also changed a lot of what was already there. Not in a destructive way, but in a way that toyed with fans of the original. So the most infamous example of this is there's a corridor in the original game where when you walk down it, zombie dogs jump through the window. But in the remake, they set up the same corridor with the same carefully curated camera angles, and as you walk down that corridor, the dogs don't appear. They build up that tension, they tap into that shared experience that fans of the original have, and they stare you in the eye and they say, "We are not fucking around, we are here to scare you as much as we did the first time." And I love that so much. It rules. All remakes should do this. It breathes fresh life into an experience without ruining what made it so special in the first place. There are still plenty of horrific jump scares to be found here, but by removing that one, they established very quickly to an audience that they weren't here to provide you with something old. This was still an entirely new thing that was going to scare you when eating a McDonald's all over again. I have so much sleep in my eye. Oh my god, is that going to show up on camera? Fuck's sake. So I remember when I was in this situation with the zombie cardboard cutout, I was eating like ghost and pumpkin shaped potato smileys in a McDonald's. I swear this was a thing. I swear that McDonald's did these at some point, but I can't find any evidence that they existed online. I feel like I'm losing my mind, but I'm sure they were a thing. I'm sure it was a real thing that McDonald's did. Please, can someone tell me I'm not losing my mind? At number 3, we have, appropriately, Warcraft 3. The first real-time strategy game I ever played was The Settlers 3. A game that, for all intents and purposes, just appeared in my house one day. Like, where did this come from? I don't know where this came from. I can't remember buying it. It just... I don't know. It's a mystery that shall remain unsolved. This game ruled. It had everything. It had city building, resource gathering, some pretty shonky combat. I loved the resources tree, the way that gathered materials had to be transformed into something else to allow you to unlock additional buildings or units. For a long time, The Settlers was just my de facto PC RTS. So when The Settlers 4 came out, again, I don't think I bought this. It's the same brand as 3. Where did these come from? Are they cursed games? Anyway, I bought it. I poured tens and tens of hours into it. I absolutely adored it. It was one of my favourite games at the time. However, a friend of mine, the same friend who I used to play Resident Evil and Metal Gear Solid with, common theme from this part of my life, he had a copy of Warcraft 2 on the PlayStation 1. There was something really different about this game. It was more combat focused than The Settlers, which was a resource management game first and foremost, but its unique fantasy setting and incredible music gave it this edge that left me infatuated. I used to beg to borrow his copy, completely unaware that it was available on PC. That's kid logic, right? Why would I assume this game was available on other platforms? It was just on the PS1, right? Terrible controls on the PS1. And one day, in 2002, I bought a copy of PC Gamer, and on its included demo disc was a demo for Warcraft 3. I still remember vividly the first moment I played Warcraft 3. My computer couldn't run it properly, it chugged like an absolute motherfucker, but when that first level started, I was floored. It was the most exciting thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. The demo included the tutorial to the game, where you play as that orc fella, but weirdly it also had a few levels that remained exclusive until the Frozen Throne included them as a bonus a year later. The concept of a hero character just felt so exciting, and the cutscenes, in-engine cutscenes that told an exciting fantasy story were just mind-blowing for the time. For me, anyway, compared to the pissing Settlers. I think this was the first game I ever pre-ordered. I got my dad to pre-order it for me from CD Wow, if you remember that website. I counted down the days until it finally arrived, and when it did, this is what came in the post. Look at that cover. Can you imagine being 10 years old and receiving that in the post? Look how prestigious it looks. Look how mature and exciting, how high quality that looks. Games didn't look like this in the early 2000s. Certainly not ones I bought. They look like that. Look at the difference between those two things. The full version of Warcraft 3 was everything I hoped it would be. 4 playable factions. The orcs, the humans, the elves, the undead. Each one felt completely different. They had a distinct visual style and, most importantly, unique hero characters to level up and master. I rinsed this game's campaign mode. Yes, I had to cheat because I was a kid, but I still remember the cheats, like there is no spoon and the dude abides. But a campaign with this many twists and turns, great characters, amazing pacing, levels that continued the story beyond the scripted sequences. You remember that level with all the villagers that you had to stop from getting infected? Or maybe they were infected? Did you have to infect them? Maybe I don't remember that as well. Why did I stop so confidently? And then there was the skirmish mode where I spent the majority of my time. Years after this game launched, I was just playing random matches with the AI constantly. Then there was the custom mode. This game introduced me to the concept of tower defense, for God's sake. I used to make levels using the super easy editor. What a goddamn game! I never got into World of Warcraft because I just... MMOs never clicked with me. I guess massive multiplayer time sinks. I don't know. I don't have the patience for them, to be honest. So a small part of me always hoped that they'd eventually make a true Warcraft 4, a full-blown real-time strategy game that continued, not the story, I know that World of Warcraft continued the story of Warcraft 3, but just evolved the gameplay that was in Warcraft 3. It is a shame that Reforged was so disappointing. I actually got it to review for this channel and I never did. I was just so down on it. I didn't want to make a video that was just dunking on it when so many other channels were doing it in much more, I guess, intelligent ways than I would have been able to do. I don't know. Maybe I should go back to it. Maybe it's better now. But that original release, it set me on a path that led to Warhammer, Dawn of War, Company of Heroes, Age of Empires 3, God, Command & Conquer. I went back to all of the Command & Conquers after I played Warcraft 3. But Warcraft 3, oh, that'll always be the game that holds such a special place in my heart. Number 2, Super Smash Bros. Melee. Alright, picture this scene. The year is 2003. It's my birthday, and after months of pestering, my parents have bought me a Nintendo GameCube with a copy of Luigi's Mansion, a copy of Super Smash Bros. Melee, and 2 controllers. At my birthday party on the same day, a group of my friends, my younger sister, and my cousin all dive on the sofa, sit in front of the television, and spend the entire day playing Super Smash Bros. Melee. By some twisted miracle, when I booted up the game for the first time, every single character and stage was already unlocked, even though my memory card was fresh out of the packaging. If anyone can explain that, I'd really like to know what happened there. But that day is frozen in my brain like it's sealed in amber. It's an unforgettable experience, this blur of laughter and genuine excitement. The first time you play a Smash Brothers game is like taking your first sip of pop or licking an ice cream. It's this immediate rush of sugar that consumes you entirely. It opens your eyes to what games should be fundamentally at their core. Fun, accessible, social. Of all the games Nintendo developed for the GameCube, Melee was probably their safest bet, and it paid off dividends. Yes, they've made better, more complete packages since, but Melee will forever be my favourite. 11-year-old Liam probably felt like his entire life had led to that one moment, sitting on that sofa, surrounded by friends, playing the best video game ever made. And honestly, what else is there to say? I loved the story mode, the arcade mode was brilliant. Multiplayer was the best bit about it. A superb game. Just an absolutely life-changing experience. And taking the number 1 spot on this very prestigious list, it's Time Splitters 2. When I started to plan this video, I couldn't really say off the top of my head what games came out in 2002, so when I saw Time Splitters 2 on a list of games that launched this year, I genuinely did a little gasp out loud. I got very excited. Time Splitters 2 wasn't just a game for me when I was a teenager. Time Splitters 2 was a social space where me and my best friends hung out together every single night for years and years. I bought this game in 2003 and immediately made my mum return it because it had zombies in the first level and they terrified me. So I sent it back and she got a refund. Then like a month later, I decided I wasn't scared anymore and I saw it in a bargain bin in a Blockbuster, and my mum was immediately just like, I don't know games, but I do remember that one from 4 weeks ago when you made me take it back to Asda and try and explain to the confused cashier that my son was scared of the zombies, and now you're trying to buy it again. Are you sure this is a good idea? But it was, because from this point on, this game may as well have been glued into the inside of my GameCube. When I was alone, I do nothing but rinse the story mode, its arcade modes, its challenge modes. I played them within an inch of their life. But that multiplayer, that goddamn multiplayer, we'd pile onto the sofa that was under my bunk bed because I was very cool. We'd plug 3 controllers into the old cube and we'd do the same 2 matches every single time. Deathmatch on Mexican Mission and Virus on Nightclub. The music from Nightclub is just permanently seared into my brain. Da, 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 da. For years, that was our daily routine. We'd play those levels. Sometimes we'd try to unlock new stuff or create some of our own levels using the map maker, but Time Splitters was a space that we bonded within. It was a passive experience that was just arcadey enough to never demand too much of our attention. So there was enough capacity available for us to still chat and laugh about the usual things teenagers spend their time talking about. Girls, probably. But even separate to that very personal attachment to the game, Time Splitters remains one of the best first-person shooting franchises ever, even if it was abandoned before its time. It's very early 2000s. It's a bit crass, and probably a bit yikes by modern standards, but that core gameplay, its obsession with video games and pop culture in a way that felt fun but not too obnoxious, its huge roster of playable characters, it was just a game that relished in its own absurdity. It was an arcade shooter built for local multiplayer, and it was perfect. How we never got a HD version of this on the PlayStation 3 or 360, I'll never know. This felt like an absolute slam dunk of a game to release on Xbox Live Arcade in HD. I know the license is with THQ Nordic now, so maybe they have plans to remake it in some capacity, but I do wonder if there's a place for Time Splitters in 2021. I think you'd need to change it a little bit, in the same way that Mortal Kombat kind of shedded its obsession with boobs, but still retained that comic book core that is so integral to the appeal of that series. I think Time Splitters could do the same. I just want a game like this. I know it won't be the same. I'm not 13 years old anymore, I don't live next door to my best friends, and my life is far more complicated than it ever was back in the day, but to just pretend for a minute, to rampage around Nightclub while AI-controlled bots chase me down to infect me with green flames, I think that would make me really happy. Thank you so much for watching this. I know it's a little bit different, but I'm really enjoying doing things that are a little bit different. And I'm just really enjoying talking to the camera more. So if you enjoyed this, please do let me know. Leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, share it. Why would you share this video? But any engagement really does help the channel. Oh, what are your favourite games from 2002? That's how I should end this video. What are your favourite games from 2002? Let me know in the comments below. Now I can't end videos. Bye.